Rocket League's meta is still changing in 2024, and you've got to be ready for it. As the top players in the world are constantly trying new ideas and continuing to polish their gameplay, Rocket League mechanics are continuing to elevate beyond all expectations. After some of my own analysis and consulting some highly experienced SSL players and coaches, I've carefully determined the exact mechanics you can expect to see more of this year. These are 5 mechanics that will become the meta in 2024. First up is pogos. If you've been paying attention to the 1v1 scene at all, you might have seen this mechanic a bit more often lately by a few select players. For a while, pogos have only really been used in 1v1 because people usually think it requires a ton of space to pull off and that it wouldn't really be possible with more players on the field. However, as time goes on, it's becoming more and more clear that pogos have an incredible value even in professional 3v3 gameplay. A pogo on its own is something that doesn't even require the ball. When landing from the air, if you orient your car so that it lands perfectly on one of its corners, you'll actually get a strong bounce upward off the ground. It's a simple idea, but very difficult to master because if you even slightly misalign yourself, you won't bounce at all, and it'll just be a sloppy recovery. Pogos have actually been pulled off occasionally in RLCS before. Back in 2022, Acronic did one in a European regional, and more recently, in the 2023 World Championship, AJG scored one to kick off their series against Carmine Corp. So pogos have existed at this level at least a little bit in the past, but they're starting to become more and more common now because of how useful they actually are. What people are starting to realize is that the most common use case for pogos is at the end of a defensive air dribble where you run out of boost. Usually in this position, you'd have absolutely no options and just get dunked by your opponent. But with a pogo, you can actually get a little bit of extra height to hopefully get a piece of it and disrupt the opponent's attack. Or on the other hand, if the opponent's challenge is coming a little bit later, you might even have time to pogo underneath the ball and send it past them completely. It's a small difference because you could accomplish something similar by just landing on your wheels and popping it up the same way. But sometimes that extra bit of height for the sooner and higher touch is all the difference you need. Just less than a month ago, NAS pulled off a perfect self-pass play using this mechanic in the first open qualifier of the season. You can take a look for yourself. It's truly amazing.
NAS will fully clear this one out. Love the pogo. Love the pogo. Please score pogo. Yes!
Welcome to North America, and he's brought us the pogo.
Pogos are evolving fast, and you can definitely expect to see even more of them in 2024. And you know what else is evolving fast? Well, surprisingly, ceiling shots. That's right, ceiling shots are back, but not in the same way they were used before. In the early seasons of RLCS, ceiling shots were super deadly because you could use your flip at any moment during the whole mechanic, which allowed for some incredible mind games and powerful shots that were near impossible to defend.
Unable to take it, but squishy now. Ceiling shot! He puts it through!
However, as time went on, players slowly realized just how slow and obvious the setup is. When a player is clearly winding up to hit the ball in the air and drive to the ceiling, you can easily match them on it and shut it down before it even starts. Because of this simple discovery on how to easily defend ceiling shots, there was a huge drought in them over the next few years in pro play because no one could find the space to pull them off anymore. However, recently, because of some new techniques, ceiling shots have been making a comeback, just in a different form this time. To prevent that big weakness in the setup, the ceiling shot has adapted to a few different versions. Firstly, the one that's closest to the original is the wall setup. With this one, instead of just touching it once and then driving or flying straight into the proper position, it's all about air dribbling it to the ceiling while keeping control the whole time. Air dribbling it up with 1 or 2 touches is obviously much more difficult, but it eliminates that point of weakness because you're no longer completely abandoning the ball at any point. If someone does challenge early, you can just flip it straight up above and follow up the ceiling rebound for yourself. If they don't, you just continue the ceiling shot as normal. The part that makes it especially challenging is giving the ball the perfect height where it gets as close to the ceiling as possible without actually touching it. If it does touch the ceiling, you're pretty much forced to use your jump to catch up to it, which is still a good dangerous shot, but not quite as deadly. But if you do set it up properly, where the ball just hovers barely beneath the ceiling, you're now in one of the most deadly positions in the game with a flip available to use whenever you want. You can accomplish the same thing from a ground setup as well. Pop it up and air dribble it straight to the ceiling, once again without letting the ball touch it, and now you're in that same exact deadly position. This setup in particular, where you start from the ground, is especially being used more. If you watch Zen play, it won't take long before you see him try one just like it. It's very difficult to float the ball at that perfect height below the ceiling, but still, that somehow hasn't stopped pros from finding a way to pull it off at the highest level. After trying it myself, it makes me appreciate the beauty of it even more. Let's move on to something I can't even really try though, because it's just that impressive. I call it dash combos. In the past few years, there have been a lot of small discoveries related to gaining slight bursts of speed in unusual situations. Individually, they don't make a ginormous difference, but put together, they actually change the game. Things like wall dashes started being used a couple years ago. Also, zap dashes are becoming more common at the high ranks, as well as this other mechanic that doesn't really have a name as far as I know. It's basically this diagonal flip cancel you use when landing on a wall, which is faster than a normal wave dash. There's a ton of other little movement discoveries that also evolved recently, but the true next step is seeing them all come together in combination with each other, one after the other. And a few pro players are already seeing the benefits of it. If you've ever seen Dark's gameplay in any game mode, but especially 1v1, it's really the epitome of what I'm talking about. It's truly fascinating to see him push specifically this aspect of the game to its limits. He obviously gets scored on a lot because he's just trying to do too much a lot of the time, but just as often, you'll see him catch up to the ball or reach it in a situation where it wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Realistically, I don't expect every professional player's gameplay to look like this in the future. To me, this is a bit over the top, but it goes to show you what's possible when you combine these movements together. A more balanced example, I think, is something like this. AJ posted a tweet recently of one of his most impressive goals of all time, in his own words too. He combines a bunch of different techniques in a single clip to keep his speed up despite having zero boost literally the entire time. He starts off the clip with a zap dash as he gets beat to the corner boost, which sets up this whole situation. From there, he takes possession and begins wall dashing to keep up with the ball, before getting one more touch while pre-flipping back onto the wall at the same time, followed by some more wall dashes to keep his speed, and then jumping off for a sideways wave dash into the ball to set up the final power shot across the net. If you've ever tried learning any of these mechanics, you know truly how impressive this is, which explains the insane reaction this got on Twitter. If you ever watch Zen's gameplay, you can also see hints of these dash combos there as well. Whenever he's on zero boost, that really doesn't stop him from being involved in the play. He'll dash his way into doing the job anyway, and then pick up a single pad or two if he needs to get any sort of height. None of this would be remotely possible without the crazy combinations of dashes that we've never seen up until now. With how crucial it is to play fast and conserve boosts in modern Rocket League, the importance of combining these mechanics together is only growing. On their own, these movements are already pretty cool, but seeing them chained together in a creative way is just so satisfying. What might be even more satisfying though is this next mechanic, known as the skim. A skim is a specific type of redirect where you fly into the ball for a small, delicate wheel touch. Even though it's such a light touch, it somehow increases the ball's speed in a very unpredictable way. This is another mechanic that has existed for a long time, but is especially being used now because players have found new ways to set it up more consistently. There's two of these setups in particular we'll talk about today. First one is sidewall doubles. To begin, without flipping, hit the ball once toward the sidewall with some decent power. It won't work if you hit it too slow, so be sure to give it some speed. Second, lean back and skim it with your wheels as it bounces back toward you. If everything goes right, the ball will fling off with incredible speed and a slight change in direction. It's all about finding that perfect balance to get the power and placement you need, and it's incredibly difficult. The second setup is something called a psycho. Basically, it's the same thing as the sidewall, but done off your own backboard instead. This version is a lot more unpredictable because as an opponent, you're not expecting a threat on your own net as you see someone slamming it into their own backboard. But to your surprise, because of that extra power that comes from a skim, that ball is now flying straight into your half, and next thing you know, it's in your net. Despite all this required precision, professional players are proving that it is within human capability to get this consistent, and we're continuing to see them pop up more frequently. At one point last year, Acronic scored 3 of them in a single ranked game somehow. This is still one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in Rocket League, and it proves just how controllable it is with enough practice. Because these skim redirect setups are something that you set up entirely on your own, rather than just waiting for the pass to come to you, it's no wonder why they're on the uptrend for this year. But just as skims were around for a while before having its explosion in popularity, ceiling pinches are definitely following that same path. For a while, ceiling pinches were used very rarely in professional play because while they can be extremely powerful and unexpected, they come from the same exact setup as an air dribble, which in most situations is always going to be more deadly. The fact a ceiling pinch sends possession completely away drops its value by quite a bit. It's definitely still pretty good on its own because the speed you generate is amazing, but since it unfortunately has to compete with the air dribble, it's greatly reduced its usefulness in competitive. Until now.
Immediately shut down by Seiko as the double demo comes in on the back line in favor of Vitality. Zen pinching time with the second. He smashes it home. And
I've mentioned Zen more than once in this video already because he truly is changing the way Rocket League is played. Zen has completely opened the door for ceiling pinches, proving to everyone that it doesn't have to be a mechanic that sends away possession. Somehow, he's managed to control ceiling pinches, turning them into double taps with a level of consistency so high that it's become known as his signature shot.
The magician, the superstar, it's the signature shot!
It doesn't take much convincing to see why this mechanic is so powerful, and surprisingly, it's not the hardest thing in the world to learn. If you're pretty mechanically sound already, once you get a feel for how it works, it's fairly reasonable to get consistent. The way the ball naturally pinches off your car once you find the proper technique is actually very readable. It happens to pop out at a comfortable height to finish off nearly every single time. Don't get me wrong, it definitely doesn't make it easy necessarily, especially when you factor in the vision and creativity it takes to perform this mechanic under pressure, but it's definitely something I can see being learned by other professional players very soon, if they aren't already practicing it. So be on the lookout for ceiling pinches this year, along with all the other mechanics we talked about today. It's one of my favorite things when I see a mechanic on this list pop up live in RLCS, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. Thanks for watching as always. Click the like button if you enjoyed, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.